not have gone unnoticed, but the news did not make the lead.
Alarm is still being struck, and we must take heed.
700 new HIV cases diagnosed last year, for more than an eyebrow to be raised from the statistics revealed.
Alarmingly, 14% of individuals living with HIV in Jamaica are unaware of their status.
Only 44% of those diagnosed are on antiretroviral treatment.
And only 66% of those on treatment are virally suppressed.
Bear in mind, keep in mind, that the onset of the COVID 19 pandemic has disrupted global supply chains of the antiretroviral drugs, from sourcing of base products to manufacturing and logistics in air freight.
Well, it's time to talk.
Serious talk as we reflect on all that continue to concern us following World AIDS Day, Tuesday last, December 1.
Hi, I'm Stratton Palmer.
And I'm Curtis Myrie. Welcome to Real Chat.
Any chat.
Sports Chat.
Chat your chat.
Real Chat. Jumoke Patrick, Executive Director, Jamaica Network of Seropositives, established in 1996 to advocate for the rights and concerns of persons living with HIV. Mekwichat. Jamoke?
Hey, thank you for having me.
Good.
Just in terms of definition, what is seropositives?
Seropositive is actually meaning tested positive for a virus, and in this case is HIV. So it could be as well COVID seropositive or HIV be seropositive.
When we spoke yesterday, you said to me your network has about 80% of its staff living with HIV. Is that so? Did I have it right?
Right. We're a community-led organization.
Hmm.
By the way, I'm hearing a feedback. So,
It's all right. We will, yes, it's,
okay.
yeah.
So we're a community-led organization. We have a board of directors of people living with HIV and 80% of the staff. Because we're community-led, we want to stay within that core, which means that we're working with people living with HIV, and we're using as well people living with HIV to be a part of that work and that advocacy.
Let me ask you this, Jumoke. In terms of the people who are positive, what is the relationship between what is happening now and when it was first discovered that HIV was rampant?
A lot has changed since then, and I must give especially our government and our civil society partners who are working in the response a lot of kudos for where we are now. The gains we have made, the strides we have made, and the achievement. So HIV medication is free now in Jamaica, and the government provides it to all to healthcare facilities across the island, major healthcare facilities for people living with HIV. The problem we still have is stigma and discrimination. HIV-related discrimination still be a problem for people living with HIV across the island, and that is why a lot of people who are HIV positive are not in care, are not on ARVs, and that's why a lot of them are not virally suppressed.
Tell me.
Go ahead. I was asking, the message has been out there for some time now, Jumoke. Have we reached a level where acceptability should be at a level where people feel more comfortable in coming forward?
To be honest with you, we still have a long way to go. We have done a lot of sensitization and training with duty bearers, healthcare workers, police, etc. as it relates to how to treat with respect and dignity people living with HIV. Because we still have, especially in rural areas where people living with HIV are kicked out of their homes, their communities, dismissed from their jobs because of a perceived HIV positive status. And if we're still there as a country, that means we still have a lot more work to do. And we still have reports. I think, not a thing, but in 2019, we received over 60 cases of HIV related discrimination where persons who are HIV positive or perceived HIV positive have been dismissed from their jobs, kicked out of their homes, and treated unfairly because of that. And so, if in 2020 we still have those issues, then we have a lot more work to do in terms of an enabling environment, in terms of addressing human rights related issues such as HIV discrimination.
Is it the work you do, or is that people are not educated enough?
When you look at it broadly, it has a lot to do with educating people and knowledge, but as well, even when you find out, when you pass on the knowledge, the information, people still believe that what you're saying is not true. And that you're going to get AIDS or HIV if you touch somebody, you kiss them, you share the same utensils, you sleep on the same bed or sit on the same toilet seat. No matter how many times you tell persons that no, they still believe this. And in some situations, not until somebody close to one of them becomes positive and they recognize that, but hey, this is the truth about this person. This is what is happening. And my perceived notion around HIV that I had before, no, it's really untrue, and it is from a discriminatory or stigmatizing space.
Let me get back to the story. 700 new cases in 2019. How do you receive this sort of information?
700 too much.
Yes, 700 too much.
Um, but we are coming from 2000 to the thousands, so 700 is an achievement for what we have been doing. And like I said, we have been doing our best in terms of advocacy, providing treatment and care and support services for people living with HIV in partnership with government, in partnership with other civil society organizations, going into places and institutions and communities where we have never been before, doing the necessary prevention work, doing the necessary sensitization and capacity building of the general public, but as well people living with HIV, as it relates to how they should treat with respect people living with HIV and how people living with HIV should understand what it means to be living with the virus. So we have come a far way, and I will give kudos where kudos should be given, but 700 too much if you ask me.
How are you received by those very communities? Because that seems to be a measure, yardstick even of the progress you're making. You're into the communities. How do they respond? Because as you said before, you still have
Okay.
stigma hanging over.
So what we try to do now is not just to go in a particular community with a specific HIV lens. We target communities and spaces with other partners because we recognize that while HIV is a public health issue, it as well is a social developmental issue. And a lot of the times, persons who are HIV positive, how they got how they contracted HIV was because of trying to deal with unemployment, hunger, not having any money, and wanting to feel love. And they find themselves in the situation where they become risky and they contract HIV because of wanting to meet in a need that is more important than thinking about HIV. So, for example, that woman is unemployed and depending on a man for money to feed herself and her children. She's going to be willing to have unprotected sex without a condom because the man for money because of that. And when she pleases the man in that way, she gets the benefit of doing all of that, not thinking about HIV. So when we go into these communities, we are going in with social development programs, whether partnering with the government through the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, the Heart Trust entail how we can get people back into school, and the different other agencies that exist, which in terms of a social developmental level that can contribute to the holistic development of people. And then we have conversations about HIV as well in those spaces with those partners for people to understand and see the linkage and make the necessary behavioral changes that are necessary.
In many quarters, still, the use of condoms is taboo to many men. This we know. In terms of the promotion for the use of condoms, where are we at? Are we, do we keep making the point? Are we satisfied that we are hammering home the message?
We can never feel too comfortable when it comes to this and assume that people understand how to even use a condom. We try as best as possible to distribute and give out a lot of condoms to communities in spaces where we are allowed to. And I know for sure the government has ramped up that approach in terms of procuring more condoms, and having them available across the different sites within the country. What the issue sometimes is people are telling us, oh, I'm allergic to condom, or I'm allergic to the latex. Or sometimes they don't know how to use a condom. So giving them a condom is one thing, but showing them how to use it is another. And you find that a lot of persons, because they don't know how to use a condom, when they find themselves in situations of sex, th- them not have time to think about the condom because they don't know how to use it. So they just go ahead and do the bareback thing. And then we love to talk about bareback sex, and somehow that is linked to masculinity and the whole showing of manhood in terms of how many children they can have and how many kids they can have in Jamaica. So we have to understand that things are interrelated. So when we look at issues related to masculinity and the procreation of children and breeding women, as we coin it here in Jamaica, it also links to HIV, the utilization and access to condoms.
It's a whole pile of subculture dynamics then.
Yes, definitely.
In terms of the direction flow of the virus, have you been able to tabulate whether it is more so from the men to the women or from the women to the men? And I'm pointing it to a direction where if it's from women to men, then men need to be more careful if they contract the illness.
I think the last data I saw showed more men contracting HIV in 2019 than women. And the year before, I think they were averaging around the same percentages.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, we look at the approach to interventions for both men specific and women specific, well, from a gendered lens, because we recognize that what may work for one group may not work for the other. And so we try our best as possible to do the interventions, the sessions
Mm-hmm.
like that. So whatever activities we know will meet, will reach men, we definitely know that we have to use a different approach for women. We look at There's also the issue of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence when we talk
Yes.
about HIV
Oh,
and
yes.
how women um, contract HIV in those particular situations as well, which is a big part of the challenge we have here in Jamaica, because a lot of the women who contract the virus is through these particular circumstances. The men issue, man in general for us, don't believe in wearing condom, one, and the when you look at what we portray as, like I said earlier, as masculinity or manhood or what a man should be, is the amount of people them we have, the amount of women we have, and the amount of women you can have sex with. So we have those issues, and once we can utilize them in terms of our intervention and how we approach each gender, it helps our approach, and it gives better outcome.
But in taking this risk, there's no concern about the children that you are procreating coming out with HIV. What is the percentage
They
there?
never think that far.
So they don't think, trust me, and it's even when you're having conversation with a lot of them, we have so many children, they're not thinking about it like that. They're not saying, yo, am I you, that am my boy, that am my picking.
Mm.
That's all they care about.
One,
And as it relates to children born in with HIV in Jamaica, we have been doing pretty good as a country. Less than 2%, I think it was for
Okay.
2019, in terms of mother to child transmission. So we have been doing a good job as it relates to that.
I really want to ask this, Curtis.
right.
In previous years, it was a death sentence. It is no longer so. Does that lead to a relaxation of really taking care of the situation?
Since we are better equipped because of the type of drugs that we have to sustain life, to transform dying with HIV to now living with HIV, are we becoming more carefree?
You know, um, I'm not sure how to respond to that. I'm going to be very
I
honest with
can
you,
hear that.
because I sometimes, when I think about it, wondering if because people recognize that you can live longer now, staying on your HIV medication, um, becoming virally suppressed and undetectable, whether or not people approach it sex from a carefree point of view. All right, there's treatment. We can treat any of the other STIs, and if it's HIV, there's medication for a lifetime. You just have to go take a pill for the rest of my life. And I wonder if people process it like that. But at the same time, we have to remind persons that living with HIV comes with many other complications and issues.
Mhm. All right,
It
Jamoke,
means that your immune system is compromised and you're
yeah.
more susceptible and vulnerable to other illnesses and virus, especially if the virus is not suppressed in your blood. So while you may think that you may be taking a pill for the rest of the life, there are the other
Other,
challenges that comes along with it. There's also the social challenge around stigma and discrimination and having to do and take care of yourself more than how somebody else who is not positive would have to do. So you have to share those things as well with the general public, because I've been in spaces where people talk about, well, a cancer more kill people now than
Yes,
HIV. So me
yeah,
get it as
yes.
so.
all right.
All right.
Jamoke, we just have to leave it there. Thank you ever
Before
so much.
before before we go,
You,
one last question.
Yes.
What we need now? Here we have been talking the breadth of behavioral issues, right? You have been telling us revealingly how you go up and down communities engaging residents, right? The different ways of engagement. I am now calling on Jamoke, saying to Jamoke, you're the executive director of an agency of a network that's doing fascinating work. What more what more? What
What
more?
more?
What more? Because we want to eliminate this thing, if at all possible. In your armor, what more do you need?
What is definitely important at this time, especially for us as a network and an advocacy organization, is to ensure that the human rights, the dignity of people living with HIV is safeguarded and protected. So we need more policies and laws that protects people living with HIV when it comes to discrimination, because there's this free will of doing to and treating people living with HIV in dehumanizing, disrespectful ways, because the system doesn't hold public healthcare workers or whomever accountable for such a situation. So we need to do more work in relation to that. And if we can have systems in place to protect people living with HIV, I guarantee you'll have more people coming to care, staying on their medication, accessing services, and ultimately coming virally suppressed. And that in and of itself would reduce AIDS-related deaths in Jamaica.
Thank you, Jamoke. We'll have a lot more to talk about on this very said subject. We'll be right
Thank you
back.
very much. Thanks for having me.
Good, 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 good.